Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Forti with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the Artist Index. And today, well, I say this every time, we have a special guest, but she is a special guest because she is an opera singer and more. And what's special about that is that my career path at one time was worked for Boris Goldovsky, the Metropolitan Opera, and for Sarah Caldwell. And it's been so many years, and I think it's just cool. So with that in mind, I'll let our guests introduce themselves and spell their name, because that's always very, very important.
Okay, hello, my name is Patrice Tiedemann. It's Patrice, and my last name is Tiedemann, Tiedemann. And I am a soprano.
You are.
I am.
Yeah, but not this kind of soprano. The finger to the nose. Yeah, not. No. The first question when I saw your name was Tiedemann. You're the second Tiedemann that I've known. And the first one was, I guess he was the vice president of loans at the old New Bedford Acushnet Cooperative Bank in New Bedford. Mm-hmm. So I was just sort of curious if there was any relation.
Not that I know of.
Yeah. Are you from the local Tiedemans or from the away Tiedemans?
My father came here from Germany and was in the German Navy and met my mother, and then along I came, and it's myself and my three sisters, but as far as I know, we're the only ones in the area, and the rest of the Tiedemann family is in Germany.
In Germany, what part?
He grew up in Munster.
Munster.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My brother lives in Landstuhl, Kaiserslautern. Mm-hmm. And so that's the southwest corner, I think, because they're close to Luxembourg. Where is Munster? Because
I want to say north of Berlin, but I'm not quite sure. I'd have to take a look. Yeah. Researching your genealogy and all that. I mean, it's such a hot thing right now. And
it is. Yeah.
That's always on the to-do list. It always gets pushed to the side because there's always something else.
Exactly.
But it's definitely on the to-do list to figure out exactly how far back my roots are in Germany. But I am the first generation born here. So. Mm-hmm. And then my mother's side is completely Portuguese and came here in the early 20th century. And so I'm very much a half and half.
What part of the Luso world is she from?
My family comes from San Miguel and Pico.
And Pico, okay.
Mm-hmm. My great-grandmother grew up in Pico.
Yeah, it's really important to be aware of our roots. And it's kind of funny how some people who have no idea where they came from, whether adoption or whatever, mm-hmm. this odd intrinsic sense that's almost like pitch. They have this feeling of belonging to a certain group, a certain ethnicity, or whatever. Opera. Now that's not exactly common. Let's put it that way. Even when I was working as a set designer and scenic painter for the what was then the Southeastern Massachusetts University Opera Department, people say, "Oh, there was no opera there." Yeah, there was.
Oh, there was.
There was. Yeah.
I
Uh,
actually used to see the opera workshop performances when I was first transitioning out of high school into college. So
oh, really?
yes, yes. And I did some singing for Peter West there in the SMU choral department. I spent about a semester or so at SMU before I transitioned over to Rhode Island College. And, I came to opera in kind of a roundabout kind of way.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in.
Okay. So I'm a New Bedford girl. I'm a product of the New Bedford public school system. Very proud to say that. My musical influences in the New Bedford school system was wonderful. There was such a strong system for me to partake in band and chorus and drama club, and I did all of those things. And I was pretty sure when I left high school that I was going to go to school to become a music teacher. And I chose to go to UMass Amherst and didn't really like it and decided to leave that first semester. Felt I was a little bit burned out and I was there as a flute major because that was what I first started doing, and then kind of got into choruses and things like that. And so I came back and started taking classes at SMU, and just my mother said, why don't you just take some local classes, figure out what's going to go on. And in that time they used to offer a thing, I don't know if you remember, called Bright Nights in New
Hmm.
Bedford. It used to be sort of like adult education after
Right,
hours,
right.
and they had a voice lessons you could do. So I said to my mother, I'm going to try this for a little bit, and met up with a teacher there who got me started on the right path. And I started going to the opera workshop performances at SMU and singing in the chorus there, and then auditioned to go to Rhode Island College because I said, well, I'm going to do music education, and it's a great school for music ed. And you know auditioned and got in as a voice major and got my bachelor's degree in music ed. But as I started to go along, I took opera workshop there and started to really study classical voice, operatic repertoire, art song, and doing scenes and major choral works with the chorus and the symphony. And so then I said to my voice teacher, Dawn St. Jean, I said, I think I want to go to school for vocal performance for my master's. I don't think I really want to start teaching in the public schools right now. I'm young and unattached and full of energy and curiosity, and I don't think that that's the right thing for me right now. And so he helped prepare me, and I got accepted at Indiana University and decided to go out to Bloomington, Indiana, and get really immersed in opera.
Were you were the Cadales still going on when you were there at SMU?
Um,
That was Goldovsky's Cadales,
yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it was
summer programs.
Madame. Yeah, that I don't quite remember, but I do remember Madame Colbert. I
Hmm.
remember going and seeing the scenes and saying, "Oh, this is really cool. I bet I could, maybe do this kind of a thing." And and I did like the Crittenden Opera Studio in my undergrad summers, and they used to do one through some of the professors at Rhode Island College did one. So I did that to kind of get my feet wet and understand what I was doing and why I was doing this. And then as soon as I jumped into Indiana, I mean, it was the very first, they require you, even as a master's student, you have to be in a choral ensemble. And I said, oh, geez, I don't know what I want to do for choral ensemble. Well, if I want to learn how to be an opera singer, why don't I do opera chorus? And the very first production I did there was Candide. And the Bernstein family came. There was something to do with manuscripts or something. So actually his family was there. And I remember being on stage and they had a special presentation. And I'm like, oh my God, I came from New Bedford with no knowledge of this. And all of a sudden within, a couple of months, here I am in the middle of a cornfield in Indiana at this world-class school and doing this. And it was just such an awesome experience.
Okay, you kind of took the words out of my mouth for the next question. I mean, opera in the cornfields. I mean,
Opera in the cornfields.
it boggles the mind. I mean, how I mean,
How?
okay, I mean, I don't have to tell you about the origins of opera. The opera started in the streets. It was like a lot of
Right.
things. It was the poor and then it got brought up until, the poor couldn't afford to enter the building. But how the heck did opera get to be such a big thing in Indiana?
I mean, the School of Music's been cooking for a long time there, and maybe maybe they felt that School of Music. I mean, there's not a lot of temptation there. I mean, Bloomington is a beautiful little.
That was a very nice. That
There's
was a
not a lot
very
of
nice.
temptation. Well, it is. I mean, I mean, it's a beautiful little college town. It's very
Mhm.
quaint. But I will tell you that as soon as you get, and of course I haven't been back there in a couple of years, but as soon as you get about 5 or 6 miles outside of town, it does get fairly rural. I mean, you are in, central southern Indiana, and there's a lot of fields there, and here in the middle of it is a stage that is as big as a Metropolitan Opera with a mechanism like the Met. I mean, we did, I remember being in that opera chorus that first year when I was like, well, I got to get my feet wet. And I was in Lucia de Lammermoor, and the curtain comes up on the wedding feast, and we rode in on that set with the chandeliers descending, and the place just goes nuts because we're all beautifully gowned. I mean, everything made for you, tailored.
Wow.
I mean, that's the thing. You do get spoiled there because, as I tell young singers, it ain't like that in the business. I mean, you are in this Shangri-La. You're there. There's so much money put into this to give you this quality education as an opera artist, what it can be. And then when you go out in the world, then you have to start to figure out how to be creative as an artist, because a lot of times it's like, well, here's sort of the costume, and can you sort of make something out of this? And here's sort of the set, because we're trying to make opera on a shoestring budget. So what school was and then what it becomes once you leave school is a very different thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I was just thinking back too about even at UMass, or well, SMU, Southeastern Massachusetts University. Um, that house was designed, I think, for 1,200, and the state of Massachusetts, in their infinite wisdom, for some reason, cut the budget and had them reduce it to, I think it was like 600 or 800. I can't remember. So the sight lines were all screwed up, because if you were in double K seats up next to the ceiling, you could only see the feet of the performers.
Mhm.
And the pin rail prevented any mid-stage exits or entrances. You could only enter or exit upstage or downstage. There was no mid.
Oh boy.
And it was, I think, the Vermont Ballet or something came in. The bus broke down. They were late. And I remember being stage manager there, how the dancers would always run their foot over every single plank of the stage. They were trying to find soft spots,
Mhm.
and they had no time for that. And this guy had to do this flying jeté mid-stage. He went right into the pin rail. It was horrible.
Uh-oh.
It was horrible.
Oh.
Yeah, nothing
Ouch.
like flesh hitting steel. But
Oh.
still, I mean, even with the Colberts, and just to give a legacy to them, it was Madame Jacqueline Bazinet Colbert.
Mhm.
And it's odd, my grandmother and Madame Colbert appear on the same page of a newspaper. Unfortunately, it was my grandmother's passing, and it was Madame Colbert's debut at the Carnegie Hall.
Mhm.
And then there was Monsieur Colbert, maestro, and they were opera people. So people could say, they're odd ducks, because opera people are not like other people. It's theater of a different ilk. But they gave me my first chance when I was still in high school to design sets. My senior high school teacher at Dartmouth High was Tom Higgins, who was friends with them, and there was an entire circle of theater people from New York and Yale, especially in this area at that time. And they saw. I never, I was asked to join a drama club, and I did, and they asked me, to design a set for Oliver, which I did, and the Colberts saw it and they said, "Oh, can he do this?" And it was quite a ride. It was quite something else, and to work with and for Maestro Goldovsky. When I was a child in New York City, my uncle used to listen to Goldovsky every, I think it was Saturday. And so I grew up with him in my ear. And when I told the maestro this, he looked at me and he said, "Now that you've met me, are you disappointed?"
Yeah.
He was such a laid back man. It was, but it was a cast of characters. I'm trying to get Emile Fournier, Frenchie,
I know Frenchie.
who was one of the cast members,
Ah.
to do the show. And he, "Oh, what do you want to know about me?" Blah blah blah. And it's like, because it was important. There was so much that was going on there. So you went and received your master's, and what was your next step?
So I was doing my master's there. I was very fortunate to do a fair amount of productions there. They have what they call the cattle call in the fall, where everybody goes out and sings their best 4 or 5 minutes, and then a lot of the casting for that year happens through that, and they're always watching you and that kind of thing. I was very lucky that I got into lead roles right away. My first lead production there, I got to do La Cesca in Gianni Schicchi. That first winter that I was there, I got to do Agrippina, the Handel opera, and be the title character. I got to do so many things, operettas, all kinds of things. And while I was there, there's so much opportunity to audition for things, to be heard by symphonies and companies that come through. And I was fortunate to be selected to go to Indianapolis Opera for a year as a young artist there. And so I had one class left of German to finish for my master's, and I got the offer to go to Indianapolis. And so I decided to finish that last class by correspondence. And so I started Indianapolis Opera, and our job was to do school performances across the state of Indiana and into Illinois and Kentucky for school children, and up through adult groups, but mostly going into elementary schools. And we did that for a whole year. We got to do main stage productions. I got to do Emilia and Otello for Indianapolis Opera. We got to we had a fair amount of opportunity. We got to sing the national anthem for the Indiana Pacers for a NBA game. But one of the things that taught me, and when I talk to young singers now as a mentor or explaining the business and things like that, I said, that taught me a lot, because if you can be at 8 a.m. singing a high C in the middle of this rural Indiana school and connecting with these kids that have no knowledge of opera whatsoever, you stop worrying about, is my throat wrapped tight enough? Am I warmed up sufficiently? You just got to go out there and do it. And you do so many school performances, and anything can happen. I mean, kids are wonderful because they just say what they say, and we always had a question and answer afterward. But I mean, we had shows where kids threw up in the front row. They talk at you. They want to know, are you dating the guy that you're playing? They want to know those things. It was wonderful. It was hard as hell, but it was wonderful, and a great training for the rest of the career. And I finished up my year there, and then I went to Central City in Colorado for their summer program, and got to cover Madama Butterfly and do the young artist performance of that, and got to do Susanna, the opera Susanna, and be one of the 4 women, Mrs. Gleaton and Mary Widow, and did that. And then when that ended, I had to figure out what the next step was, so I came home back to New Bedford and started to audition and go back and forth to New York and couch surf and go and sing. And I've had a lot of, I've been very, very fortunate. I've had a lot of great experiences. New York is hard. I had a couple of opportunities to move there and didn't take them for various reasons, but I got very good at riding the bus and slapping on my makeup and getting off the bus at the Port Authority and then taking the subway to an audition and then meeting up with some friends for dinner or whatever, and and then going to the next audition. And it's been an interesting ride so far.
Yeah, and it's amazing too. I mean, talking about Indiana, in the middle of cornfields with opera, but okay, here we are in southeastern, what used to be referred to as southeastern Massachusetts, on the South Coast, and here we have the Colberts, and then I just mentioned Frenchie, and then I don't ever remember the woman's name because we never referred to her. She was German. And she was always, when you said the throat, it was like, oh my God, she was a freak. And we just called her Brunhilde. That's all we called her. And I thought of her, we were at the Wang watching The Phantom. And the line, "This does not happen to me." It was like, oh my God, it's Brunhilde.
That's on my bucket list to do that role, Carlotta. These things do not happen to me.
To me, yeah.
Oh, but, yes, that's on my bucket list.
I can't remember her name, but God bless her, because it was really, and for me, I mean, okay, you're a technical person, so you get to see the artistes running about. And to me, the biggest thrill was always the orchestra in the pit. There's just something about the warm-ups that just the cacophony of all of this, and then you can feel it starting. It's almost like a diminuendo. It's just coming down, and as it's coming down, it's straightening out. It was just, and then opening curtain. It's that.
Well, I always love being on the stage, and especially if you have a pit that's fairly recessed, you can often feel the vibration of the orchestra under your feet.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that, to me, when you talk about this career with people and what is the payoff for it, I say, all of the hard work, because the thing is, people say, oh, this must be glamorous. It's like, it ain't glamorous. Let me tell you that. If you ever saw me, schlepping my bags up the dirty sidewalks of New York to go from an audition to an audition and trying to figure out, how can I do this as cheaply as possible, because this is an expensive career. It's not glamorous, but all of that practicing and rehearsing, the payoff for me is that first orchestra rehearsal, the Sitzprobe, is like that is the reward, to just sit before we put in the costumes and the movement and all of that, to create that thing and to feel that melding of the orchestra and the voice together that first time, and to feel them give to you, and that give and take is just something amazing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and there was that magic, and there's also that thing where I tried to, like these sky hooks, where if you hook or grab onto a note, and you can be carried up and carried up and carried up, and then it's like, am I going to be dropped? And it's like, it's that thrill of coming down again and going back up. It was the Cadales were basically summer camp for opera singers, and it was so cool to see to hear. Mostly everybody's walking around, and you can hear me. I mean, everybody's like keeping their pipes tuned, so to speak. So it was something else. There was another opera singer. It was one of my dad's accounts. I believe they were out on in Dartmouth. I think the last name was Brownell. I don't know if she went by Brownell. That was her husband's name. They had a farm out in Dartmouth, but she was an opera singer. So there were a few from this area.
Oh yeah, and now I'm, I have a lot of, you collect a lot of colleagues in the business and friends. People live a lot of places that you wouldn't expect. I mean, there are, the miracle of the internet and connection like this is that now you can live anywhere and hop on a plane if you need to, or now we've all figured out how to master a ring light and a taped audition, and to do things like that. It really, you try to talk to singers and say, find out what quality of life means to you, get that quality of life, and then work your career around that. Because if you're just chasing the career without and putting off life you're never going to be completely fulfilled. You have to have that balance. And I think it
Yeah.
makes you a better artist too. And, and it's hard because in music school, the prevailing attitude is you have to make it to the Met. That is your goal. And if you're a music theater person, it's to make it to Broadway. And I think you can have quality of life without stepping foot on those stages, as long as that's the goal for you. And I have colleagues that love living out of a suitcase and have their things in storage and bounce from job to job and like that. And other people that say, you know what, I sell real estate and I sing on the side and I have a nice house and I have a couple of kids, and that's okay too. And
Yeah, like Frenchie cut hair.
sure, why not?
I
And
mean,
he's a great singer, and
yeah,
but he has his other things in life that, and I think it makes for interesting artists
it
if we've
does.
done other things.
It does.
You know,
It does. Yeah, my big opportunity came through Sarah Caldwell, uh, who I never met, but spoke to her on the phone every day. And I was shocked the first time I spoke with her. I was like, come on,
oh,
you're putting me, this can't be,
hello,
she can't,
God.
oh, yeah, that was my first thought. But then she was like, she was so normal, so pedestrian. And I mean this as a compliment to her.
Mm-hmm.
I was like stunned.
Mm-hmm.
I expected a lady, and for lack of a better term, I got a truck driver on the other end of the phone. She was so normal, so down to earth, so, and so she got me hooked up with Boston Ballet. And it's funny when you mentioned about those choices. 5 minutes because I still remember that day clearly. I found out I was going to be a father, and then I was offered the set design, the lead set designer for the Boston Ballet. My daughter still cringes every time she sees the commercials around Christmas. And I was like, no, I can't do it. 50 weeks on the road with a pregnant wife, first child, have no idea what's going to happen. And it was really no regrets. It's like, it's almost like the Academy Awards, just to be named, just to be selected is an honor,
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
so you can't be happy.
Right. And I mean, we all go through it, I think, where we have times where like, oh, I wish I had done this, or I wish I had done that.
Yeah.
In the career. And, I have a few regrets of things that I didn't take. They came at the wrong time, or, I didn't think it was the right thing for me at the time. But then I've grabbed onto some great things too.
Yeah.
I mean, after I came back here and was auditioning and trying out different things and got my first agent and that type of thing, I was lucky to get picked up by Boston Lyric Opera.
Wow. Yeah.
And
I haven't heard that name in a long time.
yes,
Yeah.
so Boston Lyric Opera, I was lucky. They were looking to cast singers who were opera singers, but could be musical theater flexible in a way. So I'm a hybrid. I do opera, but I also do a fair amount of musical theater. I'm a member of Actors Equity. So I have that dual personality. I enjoy both sides of the business equally. But I got picked up for Rachel Portman's The Little Prince, and that had premiered at Houston Grand Opera. Boston Lyric was sharing that production with them. And I got cast as the water in that. So I got to work with Francesca Zambello's team that came in and staged it and staged the show. And Boston Lyric was great to me because they had me do like talkbacks and introductions. Like they used to have like, how sometimes it's like talk to the maestro before the show kind of a thing. They would have artists from the show, the adult artists, because there's a large children's chorus and the pilot, and but we would each take turns going and talking about the production ahead of time to people, and that I really loved because it was a chance to put a face or a person behind the opera singer, in front of the opera singer persona or whatever. But got to do that, got to meet Francesca Zambello. She came in at the end of the production, right before it was to open, to make sure everything was the way she wanted it to be. And that was a highlight. But Boston Lyric Opera kept me very busy for a couple of years. doing outreach for them all over the city, singing outdoor concerts for them, indoor concerts. I got to sing a variety of things. And an important relationship came out of that because one day they said, we need you to go to the Boston Public Library. We're going to be premiering Thais, and we need you to go, and we'd like you to sing Thais's Mirror aria at the BPL, and we're going to do a presentation on the show, and you're going to sing that, and so on and so forth. And there'd be a pianist there, to be provided for you, staff accompanist. I said, okay. And so I had that aria in my arsenal and came there, and the pianist was Dr. Matthew Larson, and we hit it off and worked together over the years with each other. And then when I decided to form Seaglass Theater Company, he said, I'd really like to join you on this wild ride. And would you consider having me be the music director of the company? And I said, yes. So thanks to Boston Lyric Opera, who knows? And then years later, and so now I'm running this company, and the two of us are a team running Seaglass Theater Company.
Yeah, and you just segued right into my next question.
Aha, see that?
Seaglass, exactly, yeah. I got so many questions, but Seaglass specifically, yeah. Mm-hmm. Tell me, how did that come about?
So Seaglass is not my first foray into being an artistic director. Like I said, Indiana was such a meeting ground for people. I keep in touch with so many of my classmates from my time there. I was there for 3 years, and I keep in touch with a lot of them. And one of my closest friends in the world was in the master's program with me, Laura Wilson. And she at the time was living in South Carolina, in Charleston. And, Charleston has the Spoleto Festival. But she said, you know what? I think we ended up meeting up in New York. Surprise, surprise. She was living there, and we were having dinner. And she goes, there really isn't full-time opera in Charleston. I mean, it's the Spoleto Festival, and then there really isn't any operatic presence after that festival. And if you've ever been to, have you ever been to Spoleto?
No.
It is like 6 weeks of madness. It is amazing. There is performances going on day and night for weeks, and it's just phenomenal, the amount of people that come into the town, and it's all kinds of art and dance and theater and symphonic and opera. It's incredible. And then beside it is the Piccolo Spoleto Festival, which is for more of the local or regional acts to come in and do smaller productions. Mm-hmm. So we formed Charleston Chamber Opera in 2008, and our very first performance was a Piccolo Spoleto Festival performance, and we did Hoybe's Bon Appetit, the Julia Child opera, the monodrama, and she did Julia Child, and we did a couple of other pieces. We had a small orchestra. We didn't lose our shirts. And the critical, people said, hey, you've got something here. And so we developed that company over a course of several years. And we were doing creative performing with the Gibbs Museum of Art. We used to, they trusted me enough to say, here is like the book of the art installations that are coming, like things that weren't released. They hadn't even announced what these special exhibits would be. So I would get that lookbook of what the exhibits were going to be and what the art was going to be in them. And I said, I think that Charleston can do something to this and something to this and something to this. So we did programs that were built around art exhibits of Gullah culture. They did an exhibit of portraiture. So we did Henry Mollicone's The Face on the Barroom Floor, and did other operatic repertoire that had to do with seeing your face, either in a mirror or how someone views you. And one of our best productions we did there is they did a big exhibit of Whistler. And I developed through research a program called Whistler and His Women. And it was all repertoire that would have been performed or heard in Whistler's time, researched his life, and presented it from the scope of the three women that had had the greatest influence on his art. Mm-hmm. And so we did that. We shut down Charleston. We both came to a point. I mean, I was flying down there 6-7 times a year, and producing and directing and writing shows and doing all this. And her life was going in a different direction. And I had a child at that point, and my son was getting a little older and was going to start getting into school. And that type of thing. And we said, now's the time. We need to put this to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a couple of conductors up here and different people in the business who knew I had done that in Charleston and said, you should do that again. You really should run a company because you got a lot of ideas. You like to produce, you like to direct, you like to do different things. Why don't you start another company? And I'm like, oh God, do I do this? What do I do? Do I do that? Do I just keep trying to mentor singers? What do I do? And thought about it and kind of put it out there. And then next thing I knew, I was setting up my nonprofit status and picking a name. And here's Dr. Larson, who, my colleague from Boston Lyric Opera. All of a sudden he's saying to me, let's do this together. And we got a board and started producing repertoire. And so far, so good,
What do you think? Do you think it's possible to have I guess anything's possible. In New Bedford, for example, at one time we had one of the premier artisan and maker exhibits. It was the Center Street Festival. The folk festival became one of the better known venues on the East Coast. So we've had our day in the sun, but why not for opera? We have all the amenities that anybody who stuffs into a big city or into a tight schedule would love. That we've got the seaside, we have all these great restaurants, and we have facilities to handle, that kind of crowd.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. To me, I call this the Whole Foods effect. And, people saying, why can't we get a Whole Foods here? Why can't we have a Whole Foods in the area? Why? And then you get the derogatory comments. Well, there's, it basically comes down to there's not enough, well-washed people that live here. And it's like, well, big to disagree.
Exactly.
But we, this area sometimes gets this label slapped on it that it's just a blue-collar area. And we don't need or want other kinds of things. And I don't think that's true. And here's the other thing, is like what you were talking about with opera, where opera was originally in the streets and designed for all kinds of people. The whole development of box seats in an opera was so that the well-to-do could sit up in their boxes, and the filthy unwashed were in the orchestra pit throwing vegetables and playing cards and pinching behinds, and that's what they did. So how did we develop it to make opera or classical music? Because Seaglass just doesn't, we don't do just opera. We do musical theater. We do Great American Songbook. I've produced a Sinatra concert. I've produced all kinds of different things. I have so many other crazy ideas in my head of things we want to do. But if you come at it with an idea that this is an art form to be elevated and placed on a platter, and that you have to have a certain amount of education in order to understand it, you are going to drive people away. And so when we formed Seaglass, and it's in our mission and in our vision, is that we keep ticket prices low. We keep those ticket prices low. We keep the shows to be more compact and try to make them as accessible as possible, either with narration, subtitling, if we're doing something in foreign language. And our unofficial tagline is, we'll try it. How bad can we be? Buy a ticket and see. And if you love it, tell your friends. And if you don't love it, please don't tell anybody. But it doesn't need to be, we don't want people to come to our shows and say, well, I felt very intimidated. That's never the thing. Come as you are. See what it's about, see what's there. And I will tell you, this summer we are doing a production called The Lure of the Sea. And this is as a companion performance to DATMA. Lindsay Meesh and I are good friends from the Community Foundation. We were in a building blocks class for nonprofits, got to meet each other. Absolutely love her. She's so intelligent and what a go-getter and a visionary. And so we're going to do a performance this summer. And looking at the repertoire, we are in the middle now of casting. It's the Emilio Arrieta's Zarzuela Marina, which is all about fishermen in a small fishing village, and it's entirely in Spanish. It's a Spanish language opera, and so we are looking, can we reasonably cast this? All Latinx artists and Latinx music director, all of that.
Wow.
And how can you not say that that's accessible when so many people who live on the South Coast now are bilingual,
Yes.
identify as Latinx, and I'm hoping that we will bring in people who'd be curious to hear something maybe in a language that they speak at
Oh
home.
wow, that would be fantastic. Because I mean, I'm thinking of Goldovsky. I've heard him out, as I said, on the radio, and I can still smell the tubes. It was one of those big Philco, wooden things there in the apartment. But working with him, and I can still see him. The production's going on. There's a scene going on, and all of a sudden he's like, "Alto, alto! Hey, what do you think Spada-Fucili's going to be doing next?" It was like, he just totally broke the tension in the room, right? And he's like, "Hey, haven't you been paying attention?" And people were roaring. I mean, they were having a good time. Now, I'm 68. I heard him when I was conscious of him between the ages of 2 and 7. And he was doing that then.
Right.
And it's just the momentum. I mean, the second best thing to Goldovsky was Bugs Bunny. Because
Yes.
without Bugs Bunny, a lot of people wouldn't even know what opera is.
That's exactly right.
And
I've actually said to my music director, I go, we should do a cartoon concert and serve bowls of cereal with milk.
Yeah.
And do the scenes from Bugs Bunny.
Why killed the Wabbit.
You would totally buy a ticket. You
I
would
would
totally buy a ticket.
I would.
You would.
I would.
But wouldn't
just
that be
to hear
awesome?
that line, I killed the Wabbit.
That's right. He does Barbara of Seville. He does The Ring, and that's the thing. And people say, "Well, I don't like opera. I don't know opera, or I don't know classical." Yes, you do. You do. It's in your commercials. It's in your movies. It's in your consciousness from being a child. It's there. My job as an artistic director and a producer is to find the way to make it attractive to people to say, "Give it a shot. Give it a shot." It's not just for these types of people. It's for everybody. Everybody. We do musical theater too, and we do a lot of things. I mean, we have, we're fortunate here. We have New Bedford Festival Theatre. We have your theater. We have all of these different groups. We're all doing different kinds of things.
Were George and Armin at the high school when you were there?
Yes.
Were they an influence on you? Because I would love to get them on the show. George Charbonneau and Armin Marchand.
Yes.
Just for the historical record, yeah.
Yes. They were my high school drama club directors, cast me in their shows in college. And then I worked for them. So interesting thing. So I started working for them. They produced, I think the first year that they were producing, the Zeiterion was the producer of their first musicals there. They were like creating them. And I was in high school. So my first professional music job as a flutist was playing in the pit orchestra for them. So here I was in school learning for them. They were my English teachers in school, being in their drama club. And then in the summer, I played in the pit orchestra for their Playing Our Song. I did La Cage aux Folles. I did West Side Story. I did Chicago. I did Guys and Dolls, played in the orchestra. I was in their, now what they call, I believe, their apprentice program. I worked backstage in a couple of the shows doing costuming, sewing, repairing costumes. And then what a nice turn of events. Then got hired for them when I was a non-equity artist working and did Mrs. Potts and Beauty and the Beast when they did that production, and then did The Widow Corney in Oliver for them. Then, they choose shows every year. Not everything is right for everybody. And so a couple of years went by, and in the meantime, I got my equity card. And then they were going to do Sound of Music. And Sound of Music was the very first show I did for them in high school. I played in the pit orchestra, and I absolutely loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. I've loved that movie my whole life. And I had come off of playing Mother Abbess for Theater by the Sea in Matunic 2 years before that, in 2012. And I did 33 performances there in an unair conditioned theater. They're now air conditioned. Theater by the Sea is now air conditioned for the patrons, but then it was not. And I will tell you, some of the nuns did wear ice blocks inside their wimple to keep yourself cool. But I did 33 performances of the Mother Abbess there, and as an equity actress. And then Armin and George announced that they were doing Sound of Music, and I thought, well, I'm going to give it a shot. What it would be a gift to be able to come back to my city and to sing this role that I adore in my hometown. And I was lucky enough that the stars aligned. I was cast and got to do that show with them. And that, I will say, is probably going to go down as one of my best experiences. You know, when they do the retrospective with Barbara Walters, that'll probably be one of the things that one of my top 10 memories of my performing career. That'll be one of the biggest ones. And the other main one would be when I made my debut as a soloist with the Boston Pops. And that came from my relationship at Boston Lyric Opera. They were looking for woman singers to do their Holiday Pops series that year. There was specific repertoire that they wanted a female singer for. And Boston Lyric Opera sent them the names of several people that they recommended, and I ended up getting hired by them. And they had two shows at that time. One was what they call the main stage holiday program, and that was for adults. And then they had a children's program, and I was the girl selected to cover the main program, cover the children's program, and do two of the performances of the children's program. And got to do that. And the way they work the rehearsals, Maestro Lockhart's very busy. You have one rehearsal with the orchestra. And so they said, okay, this girl is going to rehearse this program, and this girl's going to rehearse this program. Everybody else take notes. So I made my debut at the Boston Pops. I walked on that stage for my first performance with them, with no rehearsal at the Boston Pops. Ooh. So with no live rehearsal with the orchestra. Mm-hmm. I had been there taking notes profusely. When the other person is on, you were allowed at that point. I don't know, if they've changed that, but we were allowed to, attend. So I got to see the setup. But I made my debut at Boston Pops as a soloist with no rehearsal whatsoever. So now the singers that work for me in the company, I say to them, that was the moment of profound fear and elation and everything all mixed into one. If I can do that, you can do anything. Mm-hmm. And Maestro, takes you through it. You're singing, and we were narrating the Snowman, so we were doing that. And you're narrating, and then you have to sing, and you're up there, and he's saying in your ear, hold, go, because he's following. And I had never done it, so I'm just had listened, right? So he's saying, hold, wait. And then he goes, go. And so you're up there singing at Symphony Hall, and he's talking in your ear and telling you when to go, and you have to prepare within an inch of your life, but you're just in the fly by the moment.
Wow.
And I walked off that stage, and I said, oh my God, this is like, what a moment.
Your feet didn't touch the ground, obviously.
Yeah. It was a great thing. But singing Mother Abbess at the Zeiterion, both equally special for very different reasons.
Well, they refer to the theater as the house. Mm-hmm. And I always used to say as a joke, of course they call it a house. I spend more time here than I do in my own house. Uh-huh. I used to sleep in the orchestra pit, like on top of bags of takeout food, to protect me from the cement floor. You would be running in shifts of 36 hours, trying to get the show ready, doing things like lighting the show. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, people don't realize, it takes a long time to light a show, and then have the
Yes.
audio guys come in and drop all your pipes, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
what are you doing? I got to relight the whole show again,
Mm-hmm.
and because back then they didn't have wireless. Well, actually, it
Right.
was the very, very beginning of wireless,
Mm-hmm.
where they had the antenna sticking out of a microphone, a handheld mic, and it was
Mm-hmm.
horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's all those things, and you're dealing with personalities, you're dealing with time crunches and such. But yeah, I remember Così fan tutte, second act, the garden scene.
Um,
There's a three
um,
act.
are you thinking Marriage of Figaro? Because Marriage of Figaro has the garden at the end in
I
the
think it's
moonlight.
Così fan tutte.
Okay. I mean, there's
Madame had to
always
have a fountain.
okay. Yeah. Okay.
She told me she wanted a fountain to go with my set.
Okay.
And I was
With
looking
real
at
water?
her like, with real water.
Oh,
And I'm looking
okay.
and I'm looking at her, and my brain is screaming, "Are you insane, woman?"
Mm-hmm.
And yes, madame, I'll do my best. So we got the
Mhm.
fountain, the whole 9 yards. We got it rigged on a wagon. So my biggest fear was the sloshing. So now the curtain opens, and I remember Tom Higgins, and you know how theater people's mouths are. I've worked in industries where not swearing was, um, and
It's not for the faint of heart.
not for
No.
it's not for the faint of heart.
No.
So opening night, second act, curtain opens, and there's applause, and I'm looking from there's nobody on stage, and I said, "Tom, what the hell are they applauding for?" And he says, "It's your set, you idiot. It's fucking gorgeous." And it was
See?
like,
Yeah.
that's like,
Well, you think about the Bohème, the Zeffirelli Bohème at the Met. When the curtain comes up on Act 2 and they see that double level set and you've got everybody doing something,
yeah,
people applaud because it's spectacular.
it is.
Yeah.
There is a, I mean, and from the simplest performance, well, on a black set with a key light, where
Mhm.
you can be lifted with the angels, to something that I'm short of the elephants and Aida coming on stage,
Uh-huh.
that kind of thing.
And that's the thing about opera, is that that spectacle can be absolutely spectacular. But if you don't have performances that have emotion and intent and connection to the material, you don't have anything. So you
Yeah.
can, like you say, you can do opera in jeans up close, or you can do it in a Zeffirelli Bohème with 200 people on stage in a horse cart,
Yeah.
and you can have the same emotional, oh, I love this, to both.
It's I remember, as you're speaking now, I remember Goldovsky walking out onto stage and saying, "There's a lot of you here who got dragged here."
Yeah.
And he's like, and you're saying to yourself, "I don't know anything about opera, and I really don't care." And he looks at him, he points out to a couple of men in the audience, and he said, "You're absolutely wrong. You like sex, don't you?"
Yeah.
And it's like dead quiet in the audience, right?
Yeah.
And he says, "It's all about sex. Now you're going to pay attention."
Right.
It's funny because, with wine, for example, I used to do this wine show. I was one half of the wine guys. And the flaw in the plan is that we wanted to show people that wine could be for the common person, but obviously the wine companies didn't want anybody, no, don't do that, because everybody thought that, you had to, there was this great mystery about wine. And you tell anybody who's been to Europe that there was one friend of mine who said the best wine I've ever had in my entire life came out of a faucet in the wall in Italy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one of those the holes, the wine holes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with opera, that I would really love to see it come back as a festival, kind of a summer event.
I am hoping that at some, I get this kernel of idea that, you were talking about Center Street Festival and the New Bedford Folk Festival. Why couldn't this area have a week-long music festival of classical repertoire, or that kind of, a little
Exactly.
bit of everything. Why not? I mean, folk, I love folk music. I love bluegrass. I love all of that kind of stuff. I think everything has its place,
Yeah,
and we have the Jazz Fest, but why isn't there something that's like a Spoleto, but here?
exactly. And we have the facilities for it. We have,
We do. We
we
do.
have
I
the
mean, one of the
venues.
challenges has been in this area has been that the Zeiterion is a 1,200 plus seat theater, and we need a venue that's in the 300s.
Yeah, because if you
I
don't fill the
believe the
1200, it's looks a
correct, and
little
I think
sad.
the UMass theater is
Um,
700.
I can't remember the house. I think it was supposed to be 12, but they cut it. I think I remember Tom Higgins saying they cut it in half, so it's like 650.
Right.
Yeah.
But and I'm Steeple Playhouse is being renovated, and Seaglass, we're hoping that we will be able to do productions there once
Hmm.
that it's open for business, and to present some things there, which will give us some technical abilities that we haven't had. I mean, we've gotten very creative in trying to figure out how to make lighting happen, and so I've talked to Eric about, you're going to have a light rig. And
Eric Paradis.
yes, correct.
I'm
And
sorry, Paradise. I almost said Paradis. So in French,
Paradiso.
yeah, Paradis. Yeah,
Well, we
yeah,
can call him Eric Paradiso. Makes
yeah,
him makes him sound
yeah,
intriguing, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Love you, Eric.
yeah.
But so we've talked about that, about Seaglass coming in, and I mean, there is no buried pit because it was a church.
Hmm.
But that's the interesting thing about this business, is trying to figure out how do we make a satisfying experience with what we have. And so Steeple Playhouse should be able to give us, or give the community, some more tools to present things that are halfway between a Zeiterion all-out spectacular,
Hmm.
all the bells and whistles show like Festival Theater puts on, or between a church altar, where we've done productions in churches and just had to light it simply and say, you know what, we're
Yeah,
going to put our money into paying our artists. That's a big
yeah,
thing for me, is to pay my artists fairly, to treat them well, and then we'll worry about the rest later. But that goes into that whole accessibility thing too,
yeah.
in
It
doing
does.
productions. Do we need
Yeah.
all of those things?
I mean, I remember Natick High School. Um, they belonged to the American Shakespeare repertoire, whatever it was. But I saw Macbeth there. It's theater and around.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw Billy Budd there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was when they hung Billy. I mean, he was swinging over the audience. I mean, people were screaming when they saw him go up. But again, it was a high school, and they did a phenomenal job with what they had. And I think it's completely possible. We're going to have to start wrapping this up. We're down to the last few minutes. Claude Colbert, I would love to have him on the show,
I know Cod.
because my first set for the Colberts was Amal and the Night Visitors, and Claude debuted as Amal.
Ah,
So it's just one of those things. But seriously, to have a festival, to have even a bunch of us were down at the fort. We were citing a possible project down at Fort Tabor,
mm-hmm.
and at one time I was the senior graphic designer when I got out of grad school there. And one of my visions was, this would make a great theater. It's not a big house. You could stage this thing beautifully, and you don't need a big audience. In fact, you want to almost have it exclusive so that people, the ticket prices are higher, and you want people on a waiting list to go in, so you could have multiple performances. But the acoustics in there are like phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a possibility there as well.
Oh. Well, I will
But
say, during the pandemic, we had a lot of plans of things we were going to do, and then all of a sudden
yeah,
we were like, okay.
yeah,
But I'm proud of my company and my board and the singers, because since June 19th we have been presenting repertoire online. We just put up our 29th show, or
wow,
we started in the summer with music and martinis. And the great thing is that the younger singers now have grown up with technology. So when we said to them, can you record things and whatever, they're like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. But we have had to tailor a whole season to that. And so next month we are filming in Yarmouth, Divas and Diamonds, our 4-part series, all 7 opera singers doing opera and musical theater, all women's repertoire. So I'm fortunate I get to do the Del Rose and Cavalier trio with 2 of my singers that I've hired, and but we're filming it there and then breaking it up into 4 easily digestible half-hour concerts, and we present them free of charge to people online. There was a big debate too. Do we charge people for this content? And we said, you know what? No, we're not going to do that. We're just going to. This is available to anyone to see. Anyone can go on our YouTube channel, see everything that we have put up since the beginning of the pandemic is free. It's hanging on there. And when we get back to normal time, please come and buy a ticket to see our shows. And but we are planning for in person for end of August, and then we have our world premiere in October of Wailing Women, where I have yes, you're going, ooh.
Oh, yeah, because my mind already went there. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So The Lure of the Sea in August will be the Spanish language opera, and then October is Wailing Women, and that is being composed by Jody Goebel. So we have a female composer. I'm working as her librettist. We're sourcing material, firsthand accounts of women, because everything we talk about with Wailing with New Bedford ends up being about the guys. And we wanted to talk about the women and the women's experiences on land and sea. So it's not just captains' wives going along for the journey and the great adventure, but the women who are running the businesses on land and making sure that this economy survived. So it is 6 principal female singers, a female composer. There'll be a small orchestra, and one man who is called the man in the boat, and he is the everyman that just does letter reading back and forth with the characters. But it's an all female show, all about wailing, about the women.
I worked. My other theater experience was a puppet theater. I was a puppet theater manager. We developed this scale theater for the New Bedford school system to teach the students New Bedford's history. And one of the people on the project was Robert Anderson. He had, I think it might be the same Robert Anderson who just recently passed away. And I have his notes because I found them too profound to throw them away. They're copied on the old fax paper. And I have them in Portugal. I moved them from my house there to my mom's when I closed down my studio. And when you said the wailing in the opera, all I could think of was one of the things that Robert wrote about the widow's walk. I walk this walk every night, and up there, totally visible, but invisible. You talk about solitude, but she's one of many who are in solitude and scanning the horizon, waiting for news of their loved one to come back. That's opera. That's opera.
Oh, we are in the final editing now of making, of the stories. I have to now start writing the libretto of the men with the some of the material that has to be filled in from the firsthand accounts, and so we're working on that right now. But it's an interesting story. And the thing was, when we first started talking about this, it was a 15-minute ender to a concert, and then I said, "This feels like it's not an art song. It's not a woman's chorus thing. This is." What do we want to call this? Dramatic cantata? What do we want to call this? Is it an opera? So we're billing it as an opera, but it's all in English, and it has grown now to, I would say, about an hour-long production from an original 15-minute idea a couple of years ago. Now has become and sprung and sprouted into something much much bigger. And it's the biggest thing that Seaglass will have done up until this point.
I mean, I'm
And-
excited by it. I mean, my mind is racing right now.
Ah!
I mean, because I'm just imagining the aria from that perch, you know, because it's got to be, well, if it's not heart rending, then it's not an aria. It's like,
yes, I will say that
Yeah.
the like I said, we're fine tuning a lot of it, but I will give a teaser to one of the things that's planned for this. There was a story of a true story of a woman who went on a whaling journey and had a baby at sea, and then the baby died, and it's about burying the baby in a foreign land in the Pacific, in an island in the Pacific, because what
yeah,
else
you
are
can't
gonna
bring the
do?
baby back. Yeah.
Can't bring the baby back. And so that story is right now, you know, we have the pegboard with where things are going and the
Mhm.
order in which they're
Mhm.
going and that
Wow.
kind of thing. And that
Wow.
story is on there, and stories of women impersonating men in order to work on the whaling ship. And so there's some of that is in there too.
There's
But
so many stories. So many stories. Oh my gosh. So many stories, so little time.
yes, but so that'll be
Patrice.
at Siemens Bethel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, as far as a set design, well, there it is. It's the boat and
Yeah.
that historic church, and
Yeah.
maybe there'll be some projections. I'm a big fan of projections,
Yeah. Projections
especially
are
there
fun.
because you can't tack stuff up onto the
Can't
walls.
fly
and all.
anything.
Can't fly anything, and
Yeah.
how am I going to light this, and what
Yeah.
am I going to do? So that's
Yeah.
where I'm at now.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
hopefully people come see it. Hopefully we'll be able to do it safely and all of that.
Great. Great. Patrice, thank you so much.
This has been fun.
It has been. I mean, yeah. Okay. For me, it has been a trip down memory lane as well.
See?
But there's got to be a connection. I mean, you just can't, you know, and I never know where these things are going to go. So I almost wonder, you know, what happens if I get a guest that I can't connect with? I mean, you know.
Well, I've been listening to your show, and then when you've been talking about opera and the Goldovskis and the Colberts, and I'm like, we need to meet each other because
yeah.
we have a lot more in common than people think, and
Exactly.
that's the great part of life, you know.
It
We're all
is.
connected in some way.
Yeah, it is. And I'm excited about this, you know, this project of yours. And I would love to see, since you've got nothing else better to do, for you to, you know, wrestle up a summer program, which would be so cool. You know, one of the things too is the Kilburn Mill.
Yes.
I mean, that place is bloody huge.
I've been there for some Seaport Cultural District meetings,
Yeah.
and the team there is really nice. And they've
Yeah.
said, you know, when you're ready, come take a tour and see what we have here. And I think I can do some great things there. It's right now is developing that, making sure that our budgets, first and foremost, are about
Sure.
paying singers a fair wage and making sure we treat them well, and not getting into let's design this huge thing
Or
and
sing
ask
for
people to
exposure.
donate. I do not do that. Right. Just
the
like
art-
you should
art-
not paint a painting for no
Yes,
money, they should
exactly.
not sing for no money. So every
Yeah.
artist that appears at Seaglass Theater Company is paid.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Patrice, I want this to continue, but we have to wrap it up.
We'll have to do part 2 at some point.
Exactly. And you know, that brings up another, you know, thing that I'm always, you know, this is not a one and done. You're not just a page. You're a chapter. You could be an entire volume in the history, because that's what we're doing. We're building this history. And it's going a different way than we ever thought that this was going to go. There's a couple of irons in the fire, like there always has to be. And it's good to leave something behind. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
All right.
Tune in next week.
Exactly. Well, folks, that wraps up another episode of the In Focus podcast on the Artist Index. And we're not out of the woods yet, so don't be going crazy out there, even if you do have the vaccine. And regardless of everything, just be kind to each other out there.
Absolutely.
And with that, we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.